In 1939, when war was declared on England, it changed the lives of everybody. We lived about 10 miles from the city limits of London in the county of Essex. We were fortunate enough to have a backyard, and we were issued a shelter that became our new bedroom. And my mother had to wake us up when the siren went. The inside of the shelters was cold, damp, dark, no electric light of course, no heating whatsoever. It was way too small. It was extremely uncomfortable, but people just had to make the best of it. People in the City of London, they did not have backyards, so they would go to the subways and sleep on the platforms. It did save many, many lives. However, there were also some tragedies because the subways were hit also by bombs and a lot of people were killed, but it doesn't compare with the number that would have been killed in all the homes that were destroyed. It was actually the worst of two evils. Some basic things became an absolute luxury. You had to try and remember what a banana and things like oranges tasted like. The rationing was really horrendous because the portions were unbelievably tiny. And my mother, she could take one slice of beef or something and make a meal out of it for all us hungry children. And to be honest with you, I never remember going to bed hungry. We issued ration books. We also issued gas masks, which we had to carry everywhere. It didn't matter where we went, whether it was down into the shelter, whether it was to your neighbours. And we were all shown, of course, how to use these monstrosities of gas masks. They terrified me, and I'm just so grateful I never had to use it. And the government decided that the young girls, as their part of the war effort, we were going to be taught to knit. By this time I think I was 10, and it was called the Socks for Soldiers, and us children thought we were wonderful, you know, partaking of this, that we were doing our part too. All these schools in my area were closed. It was considered too dangerous an area for a large amount of children to accumulate in, which left hardly any teachers, and therefore it was decided to close the schools. We had very kindly neighbours who would open up their homes and teach us the basics of arithmetic and reading and writing. It would give us something else to think about other than the war. That year was forever lost. These people were absolute heroines of the war because they didn't have to do this. The Blitz of 1940 and 41 were actually the worst part of the war. That was when London was actually burning, and I lived close enough that we literally could see the glow in the sky. It was horrendous, tremendous loss of life. Nevertheless, there was that spirit that, you know, we're going to handle this, we're going to overcome this, and to quote Winston Churchill, that we will never surrender. My father was too old to go into the military. However, everybody was put to use for the war effort. He worked in the Ford Motor Company, and of course they stopped making cars. My father died in 1943 in the middle of the war, when things were really getting worse again. He was hit in the eye with a piece of metal, and the shock of it to his body, he got pneumonia, and he died actually from the pneumonia. And this was in 1943. He was only 45 years old. And so now my poor mother's left with us 5 children. So it became a tremendous burden for her, but I never one time did I hear her complain. She just did what she had to do. I particularly remember one occasion, we had been playing with these friends in the afternoon. We had a couple of hours of freedom from the air raids, and on the Sunday morning we headed for church, and the street that we normally went down completely blocked off, and we were told that one of the shelters had had a direct hit that night and that the whole family were killed. This was my friend. It was absolutely devastating that his whole family were killed. At the end of the war in 1945, when both Germany and Japan surrendered, we had the biggest block parties you've ever seen in your life. Just danced all night, stayed out. The streets were lit up like a Christmas tree. We just had huge bonfires everywhere. We could once again show lighting and not be frightened that it was going to entice a bomb. It was so jubilant to see some of your old friends returning alive. The troops were returning, a lot of the prisoners of war were released, and it was just a wonderful celebration. You look back in retrospect and you know, it makes puts wars in perspective, what it does to families. So everybody was impacted one way or the other. They either lost homes or they lost loved ones directly or indirectly because of the war. Some of the evacuees lost parents while they were away. They never got to come back home again because home was gone and their parents were gone. My generation will never forget the war, and it has had its effects on so many of us. I think we're extremely fearful of everything.